We were talking yesterday to DUP MP Ian Paisley, and he was telling us that fears of what will happen on the border between North and South here are misplaced, that Brexit fears are like the millennium bug in his view, that there was no need to worry about new border posts, but that if the government here tried to trip up the UK's plans to move on to trade talks with the EU, there would be consequences. Last night, former DUP leader Peter Robinson called on the Irish government here to wind its neck in on Brexit. The President of the European Council will meet the Taoiseach in Dublin today, 3 days before a deadline for the UK to set out their position on the border between North and South. John Bruton is former Taoiseach, former leader of Fine Gael and a former EU envoy. John Bruton, good morning.
Good morning.
This deadline of Monday is, of course, for Theresa May to set out her position ahead of an EU summit on the 14th of this month. What do you expect to happen at that summit?
I don't know what will happen as far as the border is concerned. The committee in the House of Commons has described the existing British proposals as untested and speculative. So obviously they will need to come up with much better proposals. In my view, in the long run, the only solution is for Britain to stay in the customs union and the single market, because creating a border either along the 300 miles of the border between this part of Ireland and Northern Ireland, or creating a border across the Irish Sea, both of those would be highly disruptive and highly politically sensitive with different groups. And the only way of avoiding either of those is to have Britain remain in the customs union and the single market. And I would remind people that the British referendum did not require them to leave the customs union. Turkey's in the customs union, it's not in the EU. It didn't require them to leave the single market. Norway's in the single market and it's not in the EU. These are political decisions taken by Theresa May, which should, I think, be reversed in the interest of good relations with Ireland and with the rest of Europe.
There doesn't appear to be any indication, though, that the UK government is willing to go along with a solution like that. There doesn't appear to be any indication that they're willing to go along with a solution like that, even for Northern Ireland.
Well, I think they have moved on a number of issues already, things that they explicitly ruled out, like jurisdiction for the European Court of Justice. They've moved on the financial issue as well. So I think we shouldn't exclude this, perhaps not next week, but over the coming year. I think we can possibly see, as they look into the detail of how leaving the customs union and the single market will impact on their own economy in Britain, I think they will begin to look again at this and ask themselves, was this a wise decision to be taken? And after all, it was a decision announced at a party conference. It wasn't a decision that was the result of a deliberative process.
What do you make of the comments from senior DUP members in recent days, from Peter Robinson, from Ian Paisley on this programme, and indeed from Sammy Wilson? They're very opposed to the idea of a negotiation where Northern Ireland will be treated differently from the rest of the UK, and you can understand their position.
I do understand their position, but the truth is that the Democratic Unionist Party was in favour of Brexit and indeed channeled very large amounts of funds to the Brexit campaign in Britain, but has never faced up to what that is going to do on the border. They've said they're in favour of a soft border, but they've never said how that can be reconciled with the provisions of the Customs Code of the European Union, which Britain had a part in drawing up. They've never faced that issue, nor have they faced the issue what would be the long-term agricultural policy in Northern Ireland, because if that diverges substantially from the agricultural policy being pursued on this side of the border, there would have to be controls.
What do you make of the position taken by Leo Varadkar and Simon Coveney in the run-up to this summit? How do you think they're doing?
I think they have to take a very tough position because, frankly, over the last several months and even more than a year, the UK has been ignoring the impact on Ireland of decisions that were taken in England for English purposes by an English political party, the Conservative Party. The issues the impact that would have on Ireland were not addressed at all by the Conservative Party, and it's only now, at a very late stage, that they're beginning to realise that leaving the customs union and leaving the single market has huge implications for agreements that they made with us in the form of the Good Friday Agreement.
What would you do if you were in charge now?
I think I would pursue the matter as the government is pursuing it, but I would set my goal not as a special carve-out for Northern Ireland, because that's going to affect one community adversely, but rather persuading Britain to stay in the customs union and the single market altogether as a whole.
Do you think that there's any danger that a fudge may be reached at this summit, that despite the talk of reassurance from the EU, and no doubt that will be emphasised by Donald Tusk today when he meets, that Britain and the EU want to move on to the next phase, and that a formula of words may be found to do that?
Well, I think all that is ever going to be produced at this meeting on the 14th of December is a formula of words. Something is going to go into the conclusions of the summit. How many sentences that will be, I don't know. But that was all that was ever envisaged for this meeting. The substance of the framework, which would eventually be agreed, is not to be produced for another year. So I think we are not going to get immense detail. But I'm very convinced that Ireland and Irish interests should be properly represented everywhere they can be given voice. And the fact that we have no nationalist representation in Westminster anymore because one party refuses to take its seats there is weakening the Irish case and is allowing the DUP to have far more influence than they ought to have.
John Bruton, former Taoiseach and former leader of Fine Gael, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.